Welcome to the second budget session of Williamsport City Council. Please rise for invocation by Councilman Noviella, followed by Pledge of Allegiance.
We're here tonight again to address the hopes, concerns, and opportunities facing our city. Our overall hope is to keep the city active, productive, and safe as we move towards our future. Doing so requires new ideas, new methods, meaningful cooperation between stakeholders, and a good command of our resources, all tied to the responsible use of the taxpayer's dollar. With that, we all moved forward with the same goal in mind, to work to create a future that we can all be proud of. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I think the coffee's ready. This is pretty loud coffee. All right, thank you, everybody. Just a little bit of housekeeping. There are a couple revised sheets that we'll got from the Finance Department that we will deal with. In particular, at the end of the agenda, since we weren't able to the other night, in terms of the mayor's office. So, Mr. Mayor, if that's okay with you, we'll just put yours on at the end. Yep. And then I was also informed that, especially because a number of the questions that we had the other evening involved some calculations and sorting out, that we were going to get a memo, I think it is, with some supporting documentation in our Friday packet. So we'll have that to review over the weekend, and then of course can take that up next week when we have our first reading of the budget. So just know that that will be coming as next steps, and of course that would also include anything that comes up, questions that come up tonight as part of the departments that we're covering this evening. So with that, we will move into the budget review for the second half of the budget, starting with the Department of Public Safety, and within that we'll start with the Office of the Director. Chief Young, how are you this evening?
President Williamson, council members, good evening. Before you is the 2019 proposed budget for Office of the Director. Currently, the salaries and benefits, the proposed budget for 2019 is $89,381. The line items are purchase of services, office rentals, $151,000, community outreach, $1,000, for a total budget of $241,481.
Thank you. Are there questions for the Chief on the Office of the Director for the Department of Public Safety? Hearing none. Next page, please. Moving on to the Police Department, pages 33 and 34.
Yes, Department of Public Safety, Bureau of Police Personnel Services, salaries and benefits. For 2018, it was $8,817,361. For 2019, the proposed is $8,800,731. The line item expenses for purchase of services: investigative expense, $5,000; training, $50,000; travel, $2,000; subscriptions and dues, $5,000; medical, $3,500; contract services, $50,000; utilities, $9,000. Continuing to page 34, general office supplies, $17,000; gas and oil, $60,000; fingerprint and photo, $16,000; uniforms, $31,850; uniforms initial issue, $20,000; firearms, $34,000; support equipment, $10,000; communications, $16,000; equipment repairs, vehicle repairs, $42,000; radio repairs, $9,000; radio maintenance contract, $1,500; computer repairs, $20,000, and vehicle lease purchase, $106,000, for a total 2019 operating budget of $9,308,581.
Thank you. Are there questions for pages 33 and 34 of the Bureau, please? Mr. Ellis.
Chief, the overtime budget is increasing. What's the detail behind that?
It's actually decreasing over the past 2 years.
From last year's budget.
It's a decrease from last year's budget, but it's
Yes.
an increase from our actual estimate. So we had lowered overtime during the year.
Yes.
And it's, is this tied in at all to the number of personnel?
Not specifically, no. It has to do with incidents, manpower, overtime, maybe some special events, things like that. So
So you're anticipating different things then?
I would anticipate, yes, because we, as of this year so far, we have filled 287 shifts of overtime to man the shifts. So I would hope that number would decrease, but that number's very high. And that's with only one homicide in 2019, which historically homicides, if they occur during the week, are less expensive than a weekend because of the number of personnel you already have scheduled during the week versus the weekend hours.
Okay. Thank you.
Mrs. Katz.
The one question I have is on page 33, line item 70160, medical. What is the medical for?
Joe, can you help me out on that? Pardon?
Testing for new hires.
Okay.
Okay.
Other comments or questions? Mr. Noviello?
For a quick reference, Mr. Young, the overtime issue there, how does our flex shift play into these numbers?
Our flex shift actually saved us numerous, I don't have a number on the amount of shifts it actually saved us, but it was significant. Being able to maneuver, especially on pre-planned events or pre-planned leave, or maybe someone's on military or something like that, we can adjust them into that to get our complement of the manpower allocations.
It would be nice to see what numbers have been.
And I
affected.
can get you that,
I'd appreciate that.
so make a note of that.
Mr. Allison.
I'm sorry, Chief, I had one other question, and then two other questions, but only one relating to the budget. What are our contract services consisting of?
I'm sorry, 79100? Mm-hmm. I believe that it has to do with the in-car NVRs, radios, recording devices, as well as taser, the new tasers that we acquired last year.
Okay.
And maybe Joe can add to that because he pays all
The
those.
bulk of that is a Spillman contract,
Oh,
the
okay.
maintenance contract for our records management system.
And not related to this budget, but just a couple issues, and I think I've spoken about them before, but the cameras and the landlord-tenant ordinance are two issues, two projects and programs that we had spent a lot of time before your tenure, a lot of time and effort to, and in the case of the cameras, a lot of federal money to go into, and to have these things instituted we had desired goals at the time, and they've kind of just dropped off. We discovered in the camera project, we were supposed to get yearly reports, and we never really got anything. Are they totally defunct right now?
No,
We're still able to use them?
yes.
At the time they were passed, there was not a clear majority on council to have them at all, but as a compromise, to get the program passed and to have the cameras available, there was the plan was made to have them in parks and not on streets targeting certain areas. But with my understanding, or my thought was always that we could revisit that at some time. And there's never been a plan, it's never been proposed. If they're of value, but we could move them other places, and I know this isn't falling in your lap, but is there any discussion about doing that internally?
We've had some preliminary and ongoing discussions in public safety regarding cameras, their usage, whether they're getting our bang for our buck. If you look at the crime analysis on the parks, our violent crimes in parks have gone down. So can you say they're working? I would say yes, but can you put an actual numerical number on that
Right.
criminal offenses? No. Personally, what I'd like to see, and as we discussed in public safety, is do a trend analysis of the busiest 7 intersections, locations, incident locations within the city, and deploy the cameras to those locations. Now, does that mean take the cameras out of the parks? Well, I don't think it's beneficial to remove cameras and let everybody know the cameras are no longer in the parks,
Right.
and then add cameras somewhere else where everybody knows where they're at. So I wouldn't want to shift the responsibility of crime from one area to another based off of statistical data that you can't prove or disprove. So would I like to see more cameras? Yes. Would they be beneficial, in my opinion? Yes. Have they been beneficial to other departments and other municipalities across the state in solving crimes and deterring crimes? No doubt about it.
Yes, and that's my understanding too, that somewhat of a deterrent, but more so of helping to solve crimes and give us information.
Correct.
When we need it. Okay, thank you for that. And the landlord-tenant ordinance, again, it was, it took up a lot of our time, a lot of the police department's time, but it's gone. I don't know if there's any, is there any intention or a discussion about revising that, or?
I've had no discussions whatsoever about that.
Okay. All right. That's all. I just wanted to, those are just a couple things that keep ruminating in my mind, and I wanted to, at the yearly report, maybe sneak them in there.
Sure,
Thank you.
absolutely. Other comment, Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for bringing that up. I remember going down to Washington DC and requesting those dollars from Chris Carney and also our senator. And I personally feel that it has made a difference if you take a look at those numbers, and this is something that I've advocated for years. Professionally, I still believe that they should be out on the street because crime occurs on the street and we can solve some of those crimes, but also I personally feel that it's a deterrent. I would like to revive those conversations with council, but I haven't gotten a real strong reading, to be honest with you. And for me to delegate the chief to come up with additional paperwork and apply for grants, the first thing someone's going to tell me from the federal government is, does your city support it? Does your council support it? Does the administration? I know we do, but I haven't really got a strong feeling on council in regards to yes or no. The last time we really got a vote on that was several years ago. There's a couple council members that are still on that were against it. I have not heard whether their feelings have changed. So in essence, I would like to continue that conversation, but I'd like to have some yes or no's. We're very, very interested in the administration pursuing additional dollars for cameras on the streets, because if we don't have the 4 votes, because it comes down to 4 votes out of 7, if you don't have the 4 votes, we're just wasting everybody's time. And I don't want to, like, for instance, let's just say we go ahead and ask for a grant from the federal government, and we are awarded the grant. And if we don't have council support on it, guess what? Next time I apply for a federal grant, we're not going to get it. So, bottom line, I'd like to continue the discussion. I'm not sure where council stands on it, but I'd like to get a better reading.
I don't think it's a council issue. I mean, my point was, we were to get yearly reports and updates on the cameras and their usage and their value, and we've never received one. I took that to mean that no one was interested in it anymore. I don't think council can commit to anything without a plan first. But I'm certain we can't commit to anything without knowing what we have in place and how we're using it.
Well, I know when...
I don't think we're asking for more grants or more money. I think we're talking about using what we have more effectively.
I do recall when Chief Forsman was here in the public safety meetings, there were several, that a list, and we'll see if we can retrieve that list, but there was a list provided to council members and public safety in the specific areas where it would benefit the citizens by putting cameras in those intersections. Something we may be able to relocate, and we can continue that discussion. I would personally like to continue the discussion, because even though you take a look at our crime rates right now, things are better than what they were 2 years ago if you look at the uniform crime reports. And I want to applaud you publicly for taking that lead in regards to assisting, but things can change overnight as well. Next public safety meeting, as I said, I'd like to continue those discussions.
Okay.
Mr. Henderson?
We have talked about the cameras in public safety. We've had different conversations with the chief about it. He did give us a report, I think it was last year, a report about the cameras and just kind of an update as to what the chief felt would be workable for our cameras. Obviously, they're in the parks right now, and they're being monitored, but some of that, we were looking into some of the problems with how they were being monitored, specifically where the monitors are in the department downstairs, and can they easily be seen, and just because of the layout, it's not working really well for that. We can always check them and go back and look at the recorded history and find out things in the parks. I remember a conversation with the chief about the added benefits to putting more cameras in intersections, and the chief alluded to that. And that would be helpful, but it would cost money to put more cameras out. Or even to move the cameras that we have from where they are to somewhere else. That would cost money. I mean, it's just, if we want to put money into it, we could see more out of the cameras, I think. And part of our issue also is just the layout of the department downstairs. We're just unable to monitor them nonstop. But I think they are useful in the parks where they are, and they have helped. So I think we're just maintaining at this point.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions, Mr. Novio?
To go back to the landlord-tenant issue that Randy and I and Skip worked on for quite some time. The work was done very diligently. I thought we had a good document when it was all said and done. What we've come across since that time period is not the fact that we haven't been able to enforce anything. It's just that we can't get the judicial system to support us in using that landlord-tenant system. We took it to court on 2 different occasions. Both times we were shut down. So if we're going to do any revising of that, we might want to take a look at the judicial system and how it addresses those kinds of concerns, and maybe try to fashion our model that will satisfy their requirements or their prerequisites, whatever it might be, because we didn't have the luck we hoped we were going to have when it came before the court.
Right.
So I think it's not much about what we do here. We can't do anything because we can't find any support when we bring charges or when we bring the issues before the court system. So we kind of need some help from some higher up, I think, on that issue before we can get the kind of results that we're looking for, I would think. Just my 2 cents worth.
Thank you. Other questions? Mr.
Yeah, how many officers are included in this budget?
It's written as 47, and I'd like to see 48.
Thank you.
And I wanted to follow up a little bit on that. Just to make sure, and part of my questions I know the answers to, but I want to make sure that the public is fully aware of it, and make sure that we're all on the same page of what we expect. In the past, when we said a budgeted number, we would say, oh, this budget is for 51 officers or something like that. And about the time you came in, I believe what we all agreed to is if we could be more flexible and just think about the dollar amount, then we could spend more of our time over the course of the year with a larger complement, because we might hire a couple people who would be in training while we had others still on the force, and so technically we'd have 53 officers or something like that, but because we knew somebody was going to be leaving or retiring or whatever, the math could work out and still stay under the budget lines. And I'll also add, the overtime and comp time numbers are so much better than they were a few years ago that has given additional flexibility budgetarily, right? And so but you know, people like to think about how many officers are there. And so this budget was contemplated with having an average force of 51 people over the course of 2018, correct?
Correct, and that would be the maximum. Everyone is at full salary within their rank structure.
For the full year.
For the entire year.
Right.
Correct.
And of course, that never happens because people come and go, and that.
Correct.
That's normal.
It's a fluid number that can rotate depending upon whatever.
Right. So for example.
It could be like, for example, now we're, in January, we'll be at 48.
Okay. So, and that's one reason why I think, you know, we look at the salary line here, and we had budgeted 3.8 for 2018, and we're going to end up at, you know, 10,000, 12,000 under that, because people are coming and going over the course of the year. I mean, I think we all understand that. This proposed budget contemplates a full force with full salaries for the full year, as the way you just described it, of 47, correct?
Correct.
And also, which budgetarily is a reduction of 4, technically, but in the end is 1 below what you would start the year with.
Correct.
Right. But under that number, over the course of the next year, the number might vary quite considerably. It could be 47 or 48 at sometimes. It might even be 50 at sometimes, but it might have to be at 45 at sometimes, depending on who people come and go based on the budget that's there.
Correct. We've been at 49 now for the last 4 months.
Okay.
So there's flexibility throughout the year dependent upon a lot of things as far as personnel are concerned.
Right.
Military deployments, things like that, that occur.
Now, and one of the questions, kind of connecting to, I think, Mr. Allison's questions, was in the past, prior to your arrival, one of the things that we would often see is if we happen to be down, not for budget reasons, just because military service or retirements or something, that we would see the overtime number spike. And so there was never an opportunity to see budget savings because either you had a full complement or you had high overtime. The total never went down. But one of the things we've seen under your leadership is the ability, because of the flex shift and management, I'm assuming, good management practices, was the ability to have some control over overtime. Am I describing that correctly?
Correct. But again, though, if you're reducing your total number,
Right.
and let's work off the premise that you're working with 51 all year long, and you come in and you cut 3.
Right,
Generally, those 3 are going to come from the flex shift because they're the
Right.
younger officers. The other officers have bid their shifts. They're locked into what they are.
Okay.
So if you've lost 15 shifts per week by cutting those 3 flex officers to replace the officers over here on your shift bid that they would have previously.
okay,
So that's how I look at it. If you lose an officer, you're down a number, but it's really shifts
yeah, okay.
for the manpower allocation aspect.
Okay, so it has the potential of driving some overtime as a result.
It could.
Yeah,
A lot of it depends on the climate of what's going on within the city.
sure, understand.
The
Okay.
pre-planned events, we're still able to staff.
Yep.
However, it would be the last-minute type injuries, sicknesses, extended
A
leave.
crisis of some kind.
Correct,
Sure.
yes.
Kind of the next piece that you weren't here the other night, but I want to connect to a conversation I have with Mr. Winder, that's a big challenge for every department, and I won't go through it in as detail this time around. But we see here in the proposed budget that last year for total salary and benefits, including overtime and everything, $8,817,000. This year it'd be $8,800,000, which is, for all intents and purposes, flat. Now, unlike Mr. Winder's budget, we don't see a big increase in pensions and healthcare, but the big difference, I mean, there's a small increase, but the big difference is the percentages are increasing because we're distributing pension costs in the increase of the MMO to every department, including yours. And of course, healthcare costs are going up by 7%. So the only way you're keeping benefits and healthcare flat, or well, the whole salary and benefit cost flat is by reducing the budgetary size of the force.
Correct.
And ultimately, what I talked about with Mr. Winder the other day, and what we've just had this exchange, that's the sticky situation we find ourselves in. Because, as we said the other night, those are things he can't control in his budget, and you can't control in your budget. The increase in the MMO that pays for the pension, and the increase in healthcare costs because they go up faster than inflation. And if we ever hope to slow down this growth and the impact that taxes have on all of the residents of Williamsport, then, it's finding the right balance between taxes, essentially, and services. And that's how I like to think of it. We're all serving the community in one aspect or another, and there are many services that the city provides that the citizens value. And so the example of the other night with healthcare and pension, and the example of a proposed reduction in the force are two prime examples of how do we find the right balance between the services we provide, protection, quality infrastructure, and the cost of those services. And if you feel free to respond, it wasn't really a question, but.
Well, personally and professionally, I'd rather see more police officers, to be truthful with you.
Of course.
In my career, when you're able, as an administrator, to have numbers on your side, there are so many more proactive things you're able to accomplish.
Sure.
However, given the budgetary constraints and the ever-fluid nature of those, when we are set with a number and being able to have the flex shift in the scenario here, we're able to do some adjustments. Is it the perfect number for me? No. Would I like to stay at least 51? Yes. Do I understand that it has to be less than that because of the nature of what we do and the money available? Yes. Can we work with 48? I believe we can. It won't require any layoffs. It won't require leaving anyone go. I believe that is beneficial to everyone, the entire force. It'll keep morale up, as well as get the job done that we need to accomplish on an everyday basis.
Thank you. And so I appreciate the exchange about all of that. A couple maybe smaller issues. I'm curious about the budget reduction in firearms, going from 56.5 to 34,000.
What number is that, sir?
I'm sorry, it is 64050 on page 34.
So 56 to 34, I believe there was, and Joe, I think, walked out, but there was an initial taser payment out of that in
Okay.
2018 that we projected,
Okay,
which the LEA and county commissioners reimbursed us additional monies
Okay.
that weren't accounted for in
Okay.
2018.
Okay.
So we don't expect that cost to be as high in 19 as 18.
it's always good to have good news, right?
Yes.
Similar question about the two lines down, 63030, communications. Went from 26,000 last year's budget, was only spent 15.5, and so it's being budgeted for 16 this year?
Yes, and maybe Joe can help me out on that one.
When our previous IT position was here, they were promoting switching some of the vehicles to a 4G service.
Okay.
The current IT personnel have found different solutions for that.
Okay.
Therefore reducing that needed cost.
Well, we're thankful for another $10,000 in savings. And then finally, I think this is my annual question. Vehicles, it looks like, what is that, two?
That would be two. At the beginning of the year, or not the beginning of the year, a couple months ago, we sat down, myself, Chief Heckman, Joe, had some separate conversations as far as some vehicle purchases and how we could accomplish that, as well as save some money.
Okay.
So we came up with the formula that the fire department next year would get 3 vehicles, we get 2.
Okay,
The following year, the police department would get 3, the fire department would get 2.
okay. And you feel within the police's fleet that that's a sustainable model?
If nothing strange happens, yes.
Well, if anything strange happens, we'll hope insurance covers it, although I hate relying on hope. But it sounds like a plan, and you know, we can give it a few years and see how it functions. So thank you for seeking to find savings in that way. Any other questions on page 34 and 33? Mr. Henderson?
Thank you. Back to that firearms number there, 64050. 2 years ago, it was at 19.5. We bumped it way up because of the tasers. So we're still paying on tasers now?
Yeah,
or-
it's a 5-year lease, but we
Okay.
don't know our contributing monies from either the LEA or the county until their budgets are approved, passed, so on and so forth.
So we can expect that to hover right around 34 for the next couple of years then?
I would think so, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Also, right above that, there's 2 lines for uniforms.
Yes.
And there's no significant change here. Just a question, though. I mean, we're spending over 51,000 this year on uniforms. I'm thinking also we're not anticipating new hires, but we have still an initial issue number at 20,000. Can you just kind of walk me through the difference between those 2 line items and how they're justified this year?
While the initial issue does cover new hires, it also is part of our bulletproof vest replacement program. So those are other numbers that are included in that initial issue category. The uniforms itself is contractually obligated
Okay.
per officer.
And this year, we spent 11,000 for the initial issue, but we're still expecting to spend 20?
I think it's a placeholder because, again, there are a number of individuals that are in the drop. We're not knowing, they can leave anytime before their 5-year cap. So we want to make sure that we have the funds in place if something does come up.
Sure, sure.
I can get you the number as to how many replacements that would be, and maybe we need to adjust a little bit, but that would leave some funding for the uncertainty.
And then, so that 62011, the 31,850, how often do we replace those uniforms? I'm assuming this is kind of replacement uniforms or something.
Per the union bargaining agreement, there's a set amount, and I think it's at $650 currently.
Yes, I believe it's $650.
So each officer annually gets $650 to maintain their uniform.
Okay,
So they're responsible for anything above and beyond that, but they get $650 towards the maintenance of that uniform.
okay. $650 for every officer, and that's regardless of rank or anything.
Correct.
Thank you, and I think that's all the questions I had. I appreciate the question about the vehicle lease. You know, I was wondering about that as well. And as to the current fleet, are we looking at any vehicles that are, I mean, obviously we need to purchase some this year. Is that because they're on their last leg, they're dying? What's going on?
It comes to a point where you're putting more into the vehicle than what it's worth.
Yeah.
And when you would go to get rid of it, and it wouldn't be worth anything. So if you have to put a $3,000 transmission in a car that's worth $2,500 and its shelf life is only 6 more months, that's really not smart business sense.
Sure.
If you're going to keep that car maybe as a backup car for the next 4 or 5 years, then yes, you would use it. So it's a rotational basis from a vehicle standpoint as to miles, wear and tear, how much a vehicle's been serviced, and to replace those from a safety aspect.
Yeah, I do understand the concepts, you know. I just didn't know if there was something specific that we were thinking, oh, boy, this car is on its way out right now, you know, or something.
No, that'll be determined when we get closer to the ordering time. The vehicle maintenance officer, Lieutenant Helm, he'll give us some ideas as to what vehicles he thinks need replaced. Then we'll have to decide whether we want to go with the Taurus, Expedition, or Explorer, so on and so forth, to outfit that.
Thank you.
And just to clarify one thing on Mr. Henderson's question, if, for example, on the initial issue uniform line, we were to spend $11,000 next year, again, at the end of the year through closeout during the audit process, et cetera, in 2020, then that $9,000 remainder falls to the bottom line, correct? All right, so it doesn't get spent in some other way that's not part of the budget.
Unless we assign it to be spent in 2020, therefore moving it out of the unassigned balance and carrying it forward. If
But that
that's
would
what we
usually
choose to
involve a
do.
transfer, et cetera.
We'd have to make the decision to do that assignment.
Okay, thank you. I think Mr. Slaughter had an additional question.
You said about the no layoffs, would that be with the 47 or the 48?
48.
Thank you.
Good question. I want to follow up on that then. If it is 40, no layoffs at 48, with the budget numbers that are here, would you have to have a layoff of, we don't need to discuss names, of course, but of the person as of January 1, or could you start January 1 with 48 and find a way to make it work over the course of the year based on what you know people are coming and going?
Find a way to make it work as far as looking at it quarterly, as far as what is our expenditures are from the
Yep.
salary standpoint. Maybe adjust from maybe another line item, or save some money in another area.
Okay.
To put back into that to continue.
Not ideal, but it wouldn't necessarily mean an immediate layoff.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Katz.
Were 3 vehicles purchased last year?
Yes,
Okay.
I
I
believe
don't
so.
remember. I remember 2, but I didn't remember a third one.
I think we got the FSU van last year, if I remember correctly.
That, yes.
And then two other vehicles.
Mr. Noviello?
Chief, just to go back to the firearms for a second, I understand that we had some donations provided to the police department. Can you give us any details on that?
The optics were donated by I believe it was, and the name's leaving me right now, on the corner of 4th or 3rd and, it was in our,
The Eagles Club.
Eagles, yes.
The Eagles Club.
Eagles donated optics for the guns, as well as some ARs were donated earlier in the year from them also.
Okay. Are those figures reflected anywhere? Do we have any
No.
idea? Because they're just a strict donation.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Any additional questions for the chief? Thank you very much. We will then move on to the fire department, pages 29 and 30. How are you this evening, Chief?
I'm well, thank you, Mr. President, members of council. How are you guys doing? Okay. All right. All right, before you tonight, you have the 2019 general fund budget for the Bureau of Fire. Proposed under 2019, start with personal services. Salaries, $2,230,000, excuse me, $2,230,295. Overtime, $275,000. Medicare A, $37,600. Life insurance, $25,000. Workers' comp, $92,000. Pensions, non-uniform, $20,860. Pensions, $1,557,705. Health insurance, $2,220,000. And severance pay, $120,000 for a total in personal services of $6,578,460. Purchase of services, water and sewer for all stations, $4,000. Light and power, $14,000. Heat, $12,000. Fire prevention and investigation, $3,500. Training, $30,000. Travel, $25,000. Telephones, $18,000. Subscription and dues, $2,000. Moving over on to page 30, supplies and materials. General office supplies, $4,000. Cleaning supplies, $4,000. Gas and oil, $18,000. Uniforms, $35,000. Protective clothing, $28,000. Other supplies, $4,000. Fire hydrants and laterals, $5,000. Then finally, under repairs and maintenance, vehicle repairs, $43,000. Communications, $2,500. Miscellaneous repairs, $6,500. Contract services, $14,000. Facility maintenance, $6,300. And then finally, under equipment, line item is support equipment, $58,000 for a total department expenditure for 2019 of $6,915,260.
Thank you very much. Comments or questions? Mr. Noviello?
Travel, or training and travel both, I think, are the first things that caught my attention. $79,530 on training, from $12,000 to $30,000. Can you give us some backdrop on that, Chief?
That was training?
Yeah.
The training is you're going to see a big rise with the amount of layoffs, bring that back, with the amount of retirements. There's going to be a boost in there because those guys are going to the academy. So we have 3 right now that we are short, and they are scheduled to start in the spring academy, which starts end of January. Okay. So there is a amount for the fee at HAC, which where they go for the fire, and if they're not an EMT, they're going to be going ahead of time, and they're going to be getting their EMT course here. So when they graduate from HAC, they'll be ready to rock and roll for both medical and fire for the city of Williamsport. We're experiencing some issues with going to local level training for EMT. We work with Joe on that on the finance side of things. The amount of overtime that's incurred by a guy going off shift, going to Penn College for EMT class, having to hire someone to replace him. weighs out, it's cheaper actually staying right to hack ahead of time and getting it done.
Okay. And then the issue of travel from 3,500 to 25,000?
It's also in there also, the guys that go back and forth to the academy. There's fuel involved. There's also a food stipend that's involved in there also. Plus, there's also a padding in there in case we have to, if I'm not mistaken, have to rent a place for them to stay. Right now, our relationship, we benefit from the Harrisburg Bureau of Fire with Chief Enterline down there. We generally will put our guys up in one of the Harrisburg City firehouses at no cost. But in the event that it's not available, maybe someone beats us to that punch or we have too many guys there for in that house, we may have to rent a space while they're at the class. It's better to have that money sitting there and come back and ask for it. So, and we're looking at next year an additional 3 more guys going minimum. So we're going to have a total of 6 in 2019.
Thank you.
Other questions, Ms. Katz?
Does that explain why the overtime is more than it has been in the past?
I'm sorry, what was that?
The explanation for the overtime, is that because of the new guys
Yes.
away from training? What is the complement up to at this point?
The complement right now, we're sitting at, was it 30, we're probably sitting at 28 guys on duty, 29 right now.
29?
Yeah, 28 to 29, I can forget. I got one off, still on the books, but he retires here at the end of December. So we're short
Okay,
2.
you have one that's retired. How many are retiring?
I have 2 gone now that we haven't replaced, and a third will be done here at the end of the month, end of December.
Okay, so you're going to be down 3?
Correct.
And are you going to be able to fill those positions?
They'll all start as firefighter ones.
Pardon me?
They'll all come in as firefighter positions, yes. I also have 2 gentlemen who are off on workers' comp injuries right now, too, so you're going to see overtime hit there from job-related injuries. One was the fire the other night on Seneca, and one was an injury downtown at a bus garage. So,
A lot of your calls, a lot of the calls that you have really don't pertain to fires, do they?
no, they're any incident we go to. It's just, it's the nature of the game anymore. Whether it be police or fire, streets and parks out doing something, our call volume is going up. The extent of calls that we get on are so much more long duration. We're starting to see that. The incidents are dragging out. Our special events, being the host city, now we do see a little bit of hit back on that, depending on that, but a lot of times we're stuck out there. So, therefore, our cost of recovery that we're trying to move into for 2019, we'll get some of that back and recover some of those costs.
Okay, what I want to also ask, how many times are you called to Loyalsock, to South Williamsport, to Boys Town, in those areas? What would you
Without
say
the
the
numbers in
call?
front of me, I would have to say they're coming in the city 25% more than we're going out.
They're coming in more?
Yeah, they're going to get more calls inside than we go out, and that we spend time. We do go out quite a bit, but with the agreement we have, we get turned right around if we're found we're not needed. What we're finding is when they're coming in to help us the other night at Seneca Avenue, they're going to work. So, and there's also time we're finding out there's just no volunteers out there.
Well, that's why I'm asking that. If there are volunteer fire companies, how are they coming into our area to do?
Well, it's part of the mutual aid program we have. There's just times when we don't have enough people. We found that out the other night on Seneca Avenue. Everybody's off hunting. I got 3 guys off that are retiring, 2 off on injury. It just so happens 5 of those guys you see them at every call. Russ Clemens was one of them. Never missed a run. Was always there when you needed him. When you lose that core of guys, you don't replace it right away. So
The ones that are coming in, say, from the volunteers, what's the term? Are they certified? Are they?
well, the state really doesn't have a certification program for firefighters to be held to. We take it upon the individual departments themselves to give their certifications. We go out and we work with them, and they work with us. We train together, so we know who they are. We know their capabilities. You can just look at an individual sometimes and tell he's got it or he doesn't. So, but a lot of times it's just throwing dice against the wall to see what shows up. So it's scarier now than it was back 20 years ago.
Well, that's
And
why
that's across the country and the state. And I'm not the only career chief in this state to answer those questions, and I don't have an answer for it. I see regionalization is a must, and I believe it starts at your level.
This is why I'm asking these questions. It surprised me that you said that they come in to help us more than we go out, because I'm thinking if we're going out, that's an expense to our department that isn't covered. And, trying to figure out, how do we go about covering all of that?
Yeah.
And then to hear you say that they come in here is kind of surprising.
Yeah, we have you know, it's tough anymore with the way the contract reads with employees being allowed to live 20-some miles away. The volunteer fire departments, as we know, are on our borders across the rivers, and getting them in here is also a start. Your on-duty crew, and the way we've changed our operations within the departments I've become chief, we have seen such a dramatic increase in the safety, in our oppression or suppression efforts, on rescues, everything, because of the belief in the culture change. And I think that's vital within our department. And I'm so proud of the guys for that. And as we continue to move with the new guys coming in, some of the older gentlemen going out, you're going to start to see that. So we just, you know, it's something I don't want to keep facing, but in reality, it's right now, we just got to weather the storm. So, and
Now,
I
you
keep
go out
praying
when-
for no more incidents, but not going to happen.
You are called out when an ambulance is called, right? To help. Why is that done that way?
We are a QoS response unit, as licensed by the state of Pennsylvania. And within the city, we feel are responsible enough to be out on those ALS or those critical calls, the chest pains, the unresponsiveness. As you know, we've saved quite a few people around this area and outside this area with just our AED responses. We get out there to assist. And we're also finding out the local MICUs or the Susquehanna Health units aren't available. They're taxed too. So there's a lot of times when our units are on the scene first and by themselves for quite a long time. And since the department's 33 EMTs, that also is a benefit that we can say no one else has around us. So, you're welcome.
Answering.
Mr. Allison.
I have a couple questions, but I remember a year ago, May, the meeting at the Trade and Transit Center.
Yes.
The gentleman from the state pretty much said there's going to be regionalization come at some point. It has to. And I think that's where we need the action to come from,
Yes,
top down, to force it.
What we're seeing in the culture right now is we have political positions talking about it,
Yeah.
but no one's acting. And if you sit back and let it on the back of certain fire chiefs, they're going to sit back and they want to protect their name and their department. With all right, they have the right to do that, especially if you're 100 years old. But there comes a time when reality says you owe it to your stakeholders to get out the door
Right.
with trained personnel, and if you can't, you ask for help, and you come up with Plan B, because Plan A isn't working.
Right.
And that's what we're starting to see. Now, when's that going to happen? It's up to you guys. And we'll be there for you all the way, support you, as I always do. It is, because it's actually driven by councilmen, township
Right.
supervisors, borough managers, mayors. I mean, they all get involved. So,
You know, I know this is way off topic, but the state right now keeps throwing money at what exists already, but it just seems to me if we got ahead of the curve and were able to develop a regionalization plan for our area, that the state would jump on that to help facilitate that, and is probably looking for that kind of model to, so I think there's an incentive to being at the front of the line in that. Back to the budget. I took some notes in last year's budget, and you mentioned there would be 3 new hires this year, or coming up, you know, and so that's coming to fruition. A couple other things you said were that in 2 to 3 years, we're going to need another engine?
yes. Yes, we're going to be, the engine we have right now is, I believe, a 2000, when did we get, when we got it and when we got it into service were 2 different dates. So I think 2017 was a KME. We're putting a mileage on that thing. The reserve apparatus sitting behind it are aging. As you know, the one was in, I think, a 98 we got out of Delaware.
Right.
The other one was a 2000 that was a twin to the one that got destroyed. So we need to be looking at those figures down the road.
Right.
I personally would like to replace one of those aging engine companies with a Quint concept, a 75-foot rear mount, which could do dual fold. It could work as an engine, but then also and work as an aerial when Tower 1 goes out of service and for short stems. And that could be a used piece, and that can save us quite a bit of money, but still be looking at that new engine replacement down the road. It's
So
vital.
We need to be thinking about the financing for that now.
Sure. Because we know it takes a year
Right,
after
yeah.
you've decided to buy it.
And the other note I have was 2019, you were going to need 2 command vehicles. Is that
On the vehicles command?
Yeah.
Currently, right now, we have one budgeted, come out of some of the funds I got in support equipment and some of it in vehicle and facility or vehicle maintenance. And we're looking at a new command vehicle to replace Car 1, which is our main command vehicle at every incident we use. And then that vehicle will drop down in the line to Deputy Chief or the Fire Protection Unit investigation. Currently, I have that budgeted. We'll start that process as soon as we get into 2019. Joe has helped me with that one. So, and we have other funds we're using. We're going to use state grant monies to help pay for that. So kind of that funding sources are all solid.
That's good. Okay.
Which I'm happy to say. So, but
right.
that doesn't kind of get to the rest of the fleet, which thanks to Chief Young, he gave me 2 vehicles and I didn't know had coming.
Right.
So I appreciate that. But we are still working with Adam Winder over here with Streets and Parks in the same way about fleet purchases. We have more power and we buy more vehicles at once, especially if you're bidding them out. So it's about us all getting it together and just doing one nice bid package for X amount of vehicles, what they are and what you want. And we've seen it across. We can beat co-stars if you want to. So we can do that.
Great. Sounds like a plan. Thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Anderson?
I just wanted to, for everyone's benefit, just point out that in the estimated income, there is an extra 20,000 in there, and I think it's due to Chief Heckman's hard work. We are in the process of looking at our cost recovery, and we're excited to be bringing that through, and hopefully the beginning of this next year we'll have something to go here. But I think he's been working really hard to beat back on these rising costs that we can do nothing about. So I just wanted to point that out, and that we've been working together on that, and we're looking forward to seeing that happen. Under vehicle repairs there, this year, 50,000, we budgeted 40, and I guess that just kind of goes right into the conversation that we just had, and I just wanted to point that out. I mean, that number's going to keep growing if we don't do something, and I'm glad that we have something of a plan. But I would concur with Mr. Allison. We need to think ahead about the new engine and start to plan for that, set something aside for that. But that's pretty much all I wanted to say.
Thank you. A comment about that idea. I remember when we bought the 2017, whenever year it was, we did the financing for that. We were able to accelerate the purchase. If I recall correctly, it ended up being a combination of building it into 1 or 2 years of CBD budget, and then allocating a chunk of the Act 13 money towards that. And so we actually purchased it a year before the original plan was. And so it may be that over the discussions of the coming year that we can, in the 2018 budget, find a way to, the 75-foot, what you described, I don't know how that costs relative to, in my head, a new engine costs about $500,000. And why that sticks in my head, I don't know. But assuming that kind of number, if we could get, $100,000 out of next year's Act 13 budget, not 19s, but 20s, and then because we start talking about it now, then building it into, say, 2 years of CDBG budget in, say, 20 and 21, then, we might be able to put in the order in 20 or 21 to be ready, not quickly, but start planning now, so that we're not trying to come up with a plan in 20 or 21 when we actually have broken down vehicles that are costing us well beyond $50,000 a year. So hopefully by reminding everyone of what we did a couple years ago, we can start doing it again this time around, for better or for worse. I had a question just about fitting together what you're talking about. We're down a couple people, we have people starting training in January, and then looking at the actuals and the proposed, just the salary lines. You said we had retirements in August?
We will have finishing our third retirement this year.
Yep.
Out here in the end of December.
Right.
Going
But how,
into-
the first two were when?
Excuse me?
The first two retirements were at what time during this year?
Let's see here, one was a month ago.
Okay.
And then we had one in late, I think it was August. Joe, is that
Okay.
correct? Something like that, it was late summer, I believe he left, till it was all finalized and done.
And it sounds like from what you were talking with Mr. Allison about, you anticipated those retirements this time last year.
I anticipated two of them. The one was a walk in and there's your paperwork.
Okay.
So that one really wasn't planned for, and those are the ones we got. How do you plan for those?
Yeah, right.
But now we know that next year I got three gentlemen that are slated
Right.
for the end of, I think, November.
Okay.
Which are senior firefighters. It's going to be hard to replace them.
Yep.
But knowing they're coming, but they're also in the drop, so it could be memos on my desk now, just doomsday.
Sure.
That they could go, but they're slated, they have to go by their date in November.
And the reason I ask that is because if you didn't anticipate all three, we probably should have seen the actual estimate for the salaries below what we budgeted. But it sounds like you anticipated and budgeted as close as you could to what the actual number would be, given that we were going to have two people retiring and you wouldn't have to pay for a month or two of this person or that person.
Correct.
Okay. And so as a result, then, that's how next year's proposed budget of 2,230 can be lower than this year's proposed, or than this year's budgeted salary, right? Is because you know you won't have people for those two people for the last month of the year, and also, remind me, what, the trainees get paid half-time or something like that?
When they're at the academy, they're
Yep.
getting their salary.
They do
But
get
it's-
their full
yes,
salary.
but it's a reduced rate as a new firefighter coming on.
Right.
With the tier system that we have, so it's much less.
Right,
than
okay.
a guy that's been on 5 years.
I
so-
think I'm mixing that up with when we send people to the police academy, that contract. Okay, so just trying to understand how those numbers are staying relatively flat, given you're accounting for people coming and going, which is a little bit different than the police, where where, as we discussed earlier, we're budgeting for the full complement, and then being flexible, so we change the number. In your case, we're not changing the number of the complement and can't really change the number of complement. So you need to, what you end up doing is being much more precise on the salary line. Okay, thank you for explaining that. I appreciate it. Mr. Slaughter.
I think one thing with discussing the vehicle repairs, I believe we saved quite a bit by having our streets and parks guys do some of the work, I
Yes.
believe. So,
Yeah, I would try to anticipate the amount of hours that Adam's crew up there did work that we would have to go out for. I don't know, what's a labor rate, Adam, right now? Yeah, I would have to say at $65 an hour, and there's at least a good 1,000 hours they've been under Bureau of Fire Vehicles this year, just by moving that in-house. And again, it's insane to me why that never occurred before, or that language, and I applaud his guys, and they're Johnny on the spot. You know, as I mentioned, last council meeting, I left here, and on the way back to the station, I lost the brakes on my command vehicle. Dropped it off, limped it up there Friday morning, and had it, well, it was Tuesday night, and had it back Friday morning. That's impressive. So, keep stuff working, so. But, as you can see, that budget took a hit this year in the vehicle repairs, because unexpected costs, radiators in the ladder, the pump. These are unforeseen, so PM, preventive maintenance, we are investing in this year. Trucks will go down at the time they're due for inspections, and there'll be PM from top to bottom by our fire manufacturer, and they'll have their inspections done, and I'd rather just pay a little more at the front, because what's going on the backside is killing us. And we've seen positives for that. So, and I think we will stretch our money farther in that line item this year. So,
yeah,
guaranteed.
so an increase of 10,000 relative to what it could have been had we not
yeah.
had streets and parks, I think is.
For sure.
Yeah, nice savings. My second question is regarding the support equipment on the bottom of page 30. At 40,000, that was down a little bit, obviously, and that was mainly the washer and dryer. We're increasing it to 58,000 for 2019. Is that what we're looking at there?
Okay. Involved in that number is, other than our normal, we're ranging around 30 to 35,000 support equipment. I'd like to get more if I could. But right now, what I'm asking for is we're taking an additional amount of money out of that to go towards the command vehicle that we'll be replacing this year. In additional, Joe has emphasized the amount of putting $10,000 to $15,000 away for our AFG grants that we go for every year. So we get those big $300,000 grants or whatever we're going for, we owe our 10%. There's where it's going to come from. And I don't touch that. So that just stays there. If we don't spend at the end of the year, it goes back. Other than that, we work below that. So, and if I need it, we'll come ask you.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you. Any additional questions for the chief? Oh, I'm sorry,
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Allison, you just mentioned that.
One I forgot, is not particularly related to the budget, but the potential closing of Almond Street.
Well, it's essentially closed now. It's being
Okay.
housed, and it's been housed since
So
number
we're
4
not
Region
using
shut down. We're actually, at this point, we do not, Bureau of Fire does not need that building.
Okay.
So we're right now resourcing it with the mayor, I believe.
Actually, if I may, we're in the process of getting appraisals for those properties. And once that happens, we will contact the finance committee to discuss what those appraisals are, and we hope to sell those properties as it is part of the financial plan.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you. Any additional questions for the chief? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Which brings us to pages 31 and 32, which relate to our codes department. Mr. Girardi, how are you this evening?
And members of council. How's everybody this evening? Good?
So far, so good.
Good. What you have before you is a proposed budget for the Department of Williamsport Bureau of Codes. Starting out with personnel services. Total personnel services for the 2019 budget is $765,282. Should I just continue to read through everything?
Yeah.
Okay. Purchases of services, office rental, $38,700. Contract services, $4,000. Health officer, $3,000. Subscriptions and dues, $1,000. Training is $4,000. Clean and seal, $23,500. Under supplies and materials, general office supplies, $7,500. Uniforms, $2,700. Gas and oil, $2,800. Other supplies, $1,500. And support equipment, $18,500. Next page, equipment repair, vehicles repair, $4,500. Under grants and gifts, zoning hearing board, $9,000. Board of Health, $1,000. Plumbing exam board, $400, for a grand total of department expenses would be $887,382.
Thank you very much. Questions? Ms. Mealy?
Just a quick question. Oh, excuse me, where did it go here? Relating to the clean and seal funds that we have, I was under the impression that we could use significantly more funds than we had budgeted on an annual basis for clean and seal type activities.
No, what we have on the line breakdown, which we give out checks, and we keep a running total of what we spend. Under our clean and seal, we have $19,540 left in that account, out of the $30,000 from last year.
Okay, so the 20,000 is even a high estimate, or do we have a bunch of activity planned in the next
That is
month?
correct.
Okay. Got it. I guess what I'm asking is that for lack of things to do or simply for,
What I try to do at the end of the year, if there's a property that needs to be removed, I take it out of my clean and seal. We just did not do that this year.
Okay.
If I did, that number would have probably came down about 10,000. We had probably had about 9,000 left over.
Got
Okay.
it.
Typically, we run somewhere around, I'm going to say close to $10,000, and that goes towards grass cuts, maintaining properties, if we have to remove part of a structure or something of that sort. That's where that money goes to.
got it. I guess what I'm asking, not that, I mean, this budget isn't on a wish list at all, but do you think that you could use more money in clean and seal activities if we had the money to spend?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I could go, there's several properties that are on the blighted list, probably 2 or 3 that are still on there that really should be removed. They're at that point where they can't be saved.
Got it. Yeah, but we're just,
And we get some money from community development, enough
Right.
to tear down one building also a year.
okay, got it. Yeah, just, I guess just, it seems to me like and then obviously liens go on those properties, correct? But we can,
Oh,
what we
correct.
wind up in situations where perhaps if the properties could be transferred to another individual and rehabilitated, we may forgive the liens. as
Correct, we did that once
year.
this year, where
Right.
we had I think, like $3,000 or so on that property, I can't remember, but you forgave the lien, so this person invested the money back in the property. If you have drove by lately, they are working on it, the roof's on it, chimneys have been repaired, the porch has been supported, not done as of yet, but it's supported, it won't come down this winter, so that was a big help.
Got it. Okay, thanks, Joe.
Other questions? Mr. Allison?
Mr. Girardi, how many vehicles do you have in codes now?
Presently, we have, I believe you're going to find we have 7 vehicles. We have lost 2 officers, so I have 2 vehicles that could be used, transferred somewhere else.
Okay. So you have everything covered
Yes,
presently?
yeah, and actually, the 4 of the 5 vehicles that I need are relatively new. We'll be able to keep them for many years.
Okay, great, thank you.
Other questions? To get to the big picture kinds of things here, and you and I had obviously a discussion about it, a little bit about this. Looking back at the salary detail in terms of current versus proposed, the proposal is to go from 10.5 in your department to 8.5. Can you remind me where you were budgeted prior to the expansion of your department?
Exactly where we're at right now.
The 8.5.
Yes. We have 4 officers, a zoning officer, myself, and a clerk and an office manager. Now, we did hire a part-time person to do street excavation.
Sure.
Okay. But yeah, we're actually at where I was back when I got hired back in '08.
Okay, so, and in term, of course, we had an unfortunate passing recently, but in terms of going into 2019, if the budget proposal stays as it is, those are open positions, not requiring layoffs to be at where you are right now.
That would be correct.
Yeah, so,
Yes.
if I recall correctly, we made 3 main changes at that time when your department was expanded. One was to have additional people. The second one was to change the salary structure to help reduce turnover. And I think a conversation you and I had, 6 or 9 months ago was that seemed to have helped with that issue.
That's correct.
Sure. And then I think one of the issues that we also expanded at the time was the growth in the clean and seal. I think you were at 15,000 or something,
Yeah.
and we had gotten you to
Correct.
30, which gave you more flexibility, not that you always used it. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I captured all of those ideas
Yeah,
together.
out of the 2 individuals that are no longer with us, one, of course, has passed.
Sure.
The other one was hearing the rumors of layoffs, so he looked for another job, and he did get a job in the same field that he was in here.
Okay.
So that was the reason why that individual left.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? And for Mr. Girardi? Seeing none, thank you.
Can I add 2 things? if
Yes,
I can?
please.
One, I did give you all a packet. I'd appreciate if you might want to take a look at it before
yeah.
the next budget meeting. Okay, there's a lot of information. It basically gives you an outline or description of what actually my department does. Okay? And the other one is, and I wasn't going to bring it up, but I figured I will. I heard there's been rumors in the paper, of course, and so forth about outsourcing, privatizing the codes department. I've been doing this 33 years, and if you want my professional opinion, that is not the way to go. You lose service, you lose revenue. When you outsource, you have people who are going to come in, that budget line item, $600,000, about 20% you're going to get. They're going to get the 80%. That's the best deal you're going to get. And they only really want to do building permits and possibly rentals. You still got everything else in that packet that you're going to have to do here, so you're still going to have people here to do that job. So I'm just giving you my professional opinion on that, all right? And again, I realize everybody worries about their department. I worry about the officers I have. We have a good crew down there. We're down to 4. I think we can manage with 4, and I still think you'll find that this department will come into black.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
And just from me as a response, one of the things, you know, when that, obviously that information is about, and one of, I think the responses that council gave, no official decisions in any way,
Correct.
but was, we'll listen to ideas.
Yep, and that's not a problem. Like I said, anybody would like to come and talk to me, or I'd be more than happy to meet with them and let them know what I know
Right.
about outsourcing, because like I said, I've been doing it 33 years, and most smaller municipalities like outsourcing because they can't afford to hire somebody, and it's better to outsource. If you look at the larger cities that have outsourced, you need to drive around and look at their structures and their facilities, and I think you'll think twice about outsourcing.
And so, you know, when we get to the stage of you know, hearing more complete ideas, I also encourage my colleagues to hear all the perspectives on what those ideas are, and, you know, for that matter, take a drive, like you said, so.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All righty, so then that takes us to pages 19 through 21 in our Recreation Department. How are you this evening, Ms. Navigan?
Doing well. How are you, Dr. Williamson and
Good.
members of council? Thank you for having me here this evening. This is the following is the proposed budget for the 2019 Recreation Administration. Personnel services, salary, and benefits of $107,113. Supplies and materials, general office supplies, $2,500. Equipment and software, $5,500. Purchase of services, advertising, $5,000. Subscription and dues, $250. Office rental, $6,100. Training, $1,700. Communications, $900, for a total of $129,063.
All right, questions on Recreation Administration? Mr. Allison?
In the advertising line item, that particular one, is that the in-house advertising we do? Or
It
that-
is, and so it will be advertising for our summer recreation programs in the Web Weekly, as well as some Facebook boosting for our events that we host, and some advertising through our recreation software.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions? Mr. Henderson?
Last year, we put 5,000 extra into the equipment software. Just wondered, how's that software going? And, you know, was it worth it?
It's coming to fruition. We're still adding some additional information into the software at this point, so it is not public-facing yet. There was a delay in training. The Civic Rec software company actually had a turnover in their training person, so we had to delay some of our trainings, but the IT department and I have been working well with getting our information in, and we're anticipating it ready to go live in about February of 2019, so it'll be ready for our busy season.
And of course, that will go well with the website once it's up and running and all of that, so we're glad about that.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just very interested in how that's going, and I think it'll be a great help to the whole department.
Yes, I'm very excited to be able to take credit cards.
Yeah. Yes, that will be a big help. Then we expect that 550 figure to continue for maintaining that software, or was that an initial cost, that 6,000 last year?
Correct. It's for maintenance of the software.
Okay, so that will continue then. All right. Also, well, I think that's it for that page, so thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, Ms. Katz?
Are we still doing AmeriCorps?
We are.
Do you have one or two people?
Just one.
Just one?
Correct. And we are looking at getting interns from Lake Cumming College again this summer.
So the AmeriCorps person is with you as we speak?
Correct.
Okay, because I heard the one person left.
She actually remained on because she enjoyed her time with us so much. But she will be moving on, and we will have to select another candidate.
Additional questions on Rec Administration? All right. Recreation Program.
Recreation Program, Personnel Services, Salaries and Benefits, total personnel services, $37,800. Purchase of services, electric, $4,200. Bowman Field Supplies, $4,000. James David Robinson Cultural Arts Grant Program, $3,000. Program supplies, $1,750. Transportation, $3,000. Supplies and maintenance, $5,000. Concerts in the park, $3,500. Special events, $20,000. Other expenditures, facility maintenance, $7,500, for a total of $89,750.
Questions? Ms. Mealy?
Tell me a little bit about special events, Ms. Novinger. It looks as though perhaps, we're under budget on the organizing the events this year?
We are
Fantastic.
currently under budget.
And did I see that our estimated income from them was 17,000?
Correct.
Meaning that we made money.
Essentially, yes.
Congratulations. Just wanted to confirm that, thank you.
Mr. Allison?
Is the special events line item, is there any advertising included in that?
There is some minor advertising included in it, but most of it will take place in the advertising line item that was on the previous page.
And the facility maintenance?
Correct. That's new this year. That is for the proposed renovations of the Shaw Place Pool House. So we'd like to see that renovated to be able to utilize that for rentals. So anything from parties to reunions, things like that. So it could be a revenue generator for us in the future, as well as the opportunity to host recreational activities and programs there.
Okay, is that going to be part of a program, part of our parks programs for?
Not this year. It is my hopes for next year.
And beyond that, the whole park, the whole Shaw Place area, do we have an idea or some concepts about utilizing that?
We do. I would personally like to see the old pool demolition site have new topsoil and be rolled for an area that could potentially be a soccer field. We don't really have a soccer field lined in the city for our use. There's opportunities to renovate the softball field there, as well as the area that's currently being utilized for football. So there are lots of renovation opportunities to really improve that whole park site.
And we have tennis and basketball there.
We do have tennis and basketball there, as well as handball and a volleyball court.
Yeah, so we could really utilize that in a
Yes.
great way, I think. Thank you.
Other questions? Ms. Mealy?
Shaw Place was not part of the park survey that CEDACOG did for us several years ago, right?
It was.
It was? For some
Yes.
reason, I thought it was just the smaller parks.
No, it's all the parks but
Brandon.
Memorial.
Okay. I don't recollect the conclusions. Were there recommendations from that report that we haven't, I mean, granted, at this point, it's 10 years out of date, but were there?
For
There-
example, there was a dog park envisioned there. And I
Correct.
know there were some others, but yes.
I was going to say walking paths, additional
Got it.
lighting, signage.
And
Those
we
were the
never-
things that I can
We
recollect.
never even did a first phase of work at Shaw Place, correct?
Correct.
Of that, right?
Not that
'Cause
I'm
I
aware.
know that, I think we've done first phases on most of the other parks that we had envisioned, that were treated, that were dealt with by the CEDACOG. But I don't know that we've gotten to second. I think we ran out of DCNR steam, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
And part of it, of course, anticipated the pool still being there. And so it would need to be revised at least for that change.
Okay. Because that's all I have. It's a park, I think, that, right, could use an overarching plan before we really undertake spending any, all that much money to speak of. Doing something with the facility that we have there makes sense to me, but I would like to see us have some sort of an overarching intent. And it seems like it's a sports-oriented park, and perhaps, that, but we need to look at what we need in the community, I guess, before we start work there. That's everything. Thank you.
Mrs. Katz?
Seasonal salary is for?
Seasonal salaries for our parks program employees.
That they're entirely different than Okay, the parks, okay.
So
okay.
the counselors
Yes,
that watch the
right,
summer day camp children.
Right, okay.
As well as an overarching site manager that put the curriculum in place last year. So we now have structured activities at our camps, and it's not just a free-for-all play. There are activities, and there's a schedule, and there are guest speakers that come. So it's a very well-rounded program.
How many are included in this?
To be honest with you, I'm going to have to defer to Joe if there's an exact number.
We don't prepare an exact number. We determine the staffing needs based upon the participants in the program. So it will vary from week to week, but we try to ensure that we have enough on staff to cover our anticipated needs and reflect accordingly throughout the season.
And this is covering which parks?
This is covering the same two programs that were
Same
in
true,
place
true.
last year.
Okay, so then,
So that would be Brandon and Memorial. And typically, we had approximately 6 summer day camp staff members at each site to accommodate the proper state ratios for the number of children we had there.
so the next park then to work on would be Shaw.
Correct.
And then after that, there was a couple of other, we really have to increase in the neighborhoods. We really do, over the years. That has been one of the things that I wanted to see us continue doing. You have to, incorporate the neighborhoods into some of the neighborhood parks.
Correct. And I think if, we can move forward with places to offer the children shelter, should there be storms or things like that, is our priority before we can add additional park programs.
Mr. Anderson.
Question about the Bowman Field supplies. We budgeted last year 4,000, only used 1, and we're back up to 4,000 again. Can you just fill us in?
I was going to say, I'm kind of leaving that as a placeholder. We're fortunate enough to have partners in maintaining the field at this point, but should those partners ever not be able to maintain at the same level that they're partnering with us at this point, I don't want to lose what we already have in place. And there's also a much higher standard of product on the field, so we kind of had to maintain that higher line item should we want to keep it at the same standards.
Yeah. The other thought or I guess question I had for you was from the income estimates. This year you're being asked for some sponsorships. And is that going to be your responsibility for the recreation sponsorships, 20,000
I would like to work with Mr. Nichols on that this year.
Okay, I just wondered what the plan was, the thought was there. It's a new income estimate for us this year.
Correct.
Yeah. So you'll be working with Mr. Nichols and teaming up on that?
Yes.
All right. Well, we look forward to seeing how that works next year. I mean,
Yes.
that's kind of a big question mark for us this year, but we're excited to see what can come of that. So,
I'm optimistic.
thank you.
Just a quick question. On the summer camp programming, would it be possible for us, or have we ever thought about trying to find a community partner who could help amplify some of the funding and/or the programming that we offer? That is to say, does the city need to do this as a solo project? I know that it used to be, obviously all of our recreation used to be run by the YMCA. But I'm just asking because it seems to me that we keep talking about expanding the summer program. I understood from you the other day that our pay rate is somewhat less than ideal for summer camp counselors, which contributes to a difficulty in finding reliable summer camp counselors. And I guess I'm just wondering if that's something we've ever thought about, whether we could partner with somebody else in the community who also offers youth programming and maybe find a way to beef up our budget for it a little bit and maybe serve some more kids, because it does seem to me like maybe volume could provide a little bit of a savings to us in some ways. I know you have a requirement for, X number of counselors for every X number of kids, but
Correct.
Anyway, just wondering if that was something we'd ever considered, or if you thought that might work.
I was going to say, we have not necessarily considered partnering with anyone. We did partner with the food bank this year to offer entirely free lunches to anyone, regardless of income level. But that's the furthest partnership, other than having guest speakers that offered activities and things for the children. That's as far as we've pursued that.
Well, certainly the food bank partnership sounds like an exceptionally positive thing for,
Yes.
for our program, so that's excellent. Thanks very much, Jesse.
Additional questions? I wanted to return to something Mr. Henderson said and Mr. Allison said. You know, you and I had this conversation, I think, a couple of years in which, you know, we're hoping to be able to subsidize some of the other expenses of the recreation program by bringing in additional dollars on special events beyond the expenses. And so I applaud you, as he did, for accomplishing that this year. And the other night when we were looking at the income estimates in more detail, as Mr. Henderson pointed out, it shows a growth in the revenue on both the direct revenue and then sponsorships. And I think, and I just wanted to confirm what we discussed the other night with your interpretation of it. The idea would be, if you're able to bring in those additional dollars, that might allow for more or bigger or grander or whatever you want to call them, special events. But in the absence of the success of this N-squared partnership, Nichols Novinger, get it? Then, I got a laugh out of Bill. Then, you know, we can always scale back the expenses so that we can keep that ratio.
Correct. I feel that the special events that we're offering at the level of expense that we're offering is still, you know, adequate and, you know, is good for what we're offering at this point. So
Right.
should something not come to fruition, I think we could certainly stay at the level that we're at and do the absolute best that we can.
And of course, we can always, it's always easier to add when revenue is available.
Correct.
And as long as we make sure we keep that in mind, and I know you agree that the idea is to help supplement some of these other places in the recreation budget. So, great, thank you for that. If there are no further questions, then we'll move on to the next section. Thank you very much. Which is the city council budget on page 9.
Do we have page 21?
Cover swimming pools? I don't think
I'm
we-
sorry?
Swimming pool.
Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped a whole page for you.
Public service, swimming pool program, personnel services, total personnel services, $55,900. Purchase of services, electric, $5,000. Pool supplies, $4,000. Bathhouse supplies, $1,500. Pool preparation, $10,000. Pool equipment repairs, $7,000. Bathhouse equipment repairs, $1,000. Water, $3,700. Equipment, $5,000. Chemicals, $9,000, for a total of $102,000 and $102,100. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Questions on the pool budget? Ms. Mealy?
I take it those increases in water and pool equipment and bathhouse supplies, et cetera, well, not bathhouse supplies, excuse me, pool preparation are related to the liner issue that's ongoing at the pool?
Correct. So if you want me to go through, pool supplies is increasing by $2,000 for upgrades to the printer and computer, which will go along with our recreation software. Pool preparation is increasing by $4,000 to accommodate ideally pressurization of the pipes to check for leaks, tile removal of tile that's falling off around the perimeter of the pool, rubberized paint and concrete repairs, as well as pump installation. And which other one did you want to review?
The water cost, which seems to be climbing.
I was going to say
same
the
thing.
water is due to not totally identifying all of the leaks from last year.
Got it.
And that would be addressed in the pressurizing of the pipes to find any additional leaks that may be underground at this point.
I hope we can get it sorted out. Thanks. Okay.
This is a rhetorical question. I don't expect an answer, and nor are you at all responsible for this. What did we pay for over $1 million for a pool upgrade that continues to leak? I'm still flummoxed by that issue.
Did it even leak to begin with?
I don't remember it leaking. and now it leaks more. So it seems like we got some lipstick and we forgot to take care of the pig. Other questions on the pool? Mr. Henderson.
Last year, we had some discussion about the Waves agreement, and they're using the pool. That was a new arrangement this year, having that agreement. I just wondered how that was going, and if there are plans to continue that, and how that may have affected any of these costs here at all. Any thoughts there?
I actually thought the agreement worked rather well. And as far as I know, we are still continuing to plan with that same agreement moving forward for next year. My only suggested change would be to address having, when the pool closes due to inclement weather, however, it clears up later and they still want to have swim practice, that they would provide their own lifeguard at that point.
Okay, very good, very good. Thank you. I appreciate you continuing to work on that. And obviously, that will come to, I think that contract was only, or that agreement was only for 1 year.
Correct.
So that'll come back to us.
Correct.
Good. Thank you.
Mrs. Katz.
Hopefully, we'll be able to straighten out all the problems with the leaks and things of that, because the pool did not open up on time this year.
Correct.
And not only did it not open up on time, but we had horrible weather this year.
We did.
So, I mean, we really lost a lot of money
We did.
this year. And hopefully, El Nino, El Nino, or whoever comes through, will have better weather, that at least, you know, the pool can stay open. But if you have enough funding at this point, that might alleviate that problem, at least, that it would open up on time.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Henderson.
Well, one more, just on the pool admissions, that was on page 5. And we're anticipating that the new software will perhaps help
Yes.
with better admission, even a better way to pay for it and all of that. So we could possibly even see that increase maybe in the future as we get that software and that printer, as you were
Yes.
talking about. Just wanted to mention that.
And
as-
better weather this summer.
And better weather.
Yes.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Ms. Mealy?
I don't know that there's a way to emphasize how much more efficient it's possible for us to be if we actively utilize the website and the possibilities of online. Dr. Williamson mentioned to me in passing that we were entering 1998. And I said, Williamsport got there a little later than 1998 anyway. But if we can, if there are just, there's a huge possibility for the city, perhaps not to save money, but to recognize a huge amount of efficiency and offer a lot more to our constituents through effective management and use of our website. We already do it with the treasurer's office because finally you can pay your tax bills online, which means that some of us probably will do it on time in a fashion that we hadn't before. But I think that the same thing is true. The ability to book a pavilion online, the ability to buy your pool pass online will make a huge difference in our sales. So thank you for pursuing that, Ms. Ottinger.
Of course.
Additional questions? Do you have any more pages?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Then moving on to page 9, City Council. Personnel services totaling $222,350. Office rental, $18,800. General office supplies, $600. Other expenditures, $1,500. Contract services, $5,000. Legislative contingency is scheduled at $125,000 for a departmental total of $373,250. Questions? Seeing none, move on to the city clerk's budget on page 10. Personnel services totaling $69,385. Other services and document imaging, $2,700. advertising, $7,000, codification of ordinances, $3,500, office rental, $5,100, training, $500, and general office supplies, $1,100, for a total of $89,285. Questions? Mr. Allison?
I forget, is this our last payment on the codification agreement?
I believe so, and Mr. Pavlik is nodding yes.
Okay. Thank you.
In fact,
Absolutely.
I would guess that the 3,500 is some sort of an update fee, or, you know what I mean? Like a hosting fee or something like that, and that this year may have been the last.
The annual replacement pages and the like.
Pardon me?
Replacement pages on an annual basis for all the ordinances that were codified during the year.
Okay.
The ongoing amount will be about $3,500. Okay. Additional questions? Seeing none, then we can move on to the Bureau of Law on page 11. And I will note the administration provided a revision, just correcting typos, I believe, for a new page 11. So if you'll do what I'm doing, replace it in your book and throw that one away. Mr. Wright, how are you this evening?
Good. Thank you, Dr. Williamson, members of City Council. I have in front of you the 2019 general fund budget for the Bureau of Law. Under contract services, legal services, $73,645. Subscription and dues, $1,200. Lien filing, $1,300. Under supplies and materials, general office supplies, $2,000. Under purchase of services, other professional services, $20,000, for a total department expense of $98,145.
Thank you. And probably the first question anybody will ask, and it may be Mr. Pavlik will want to explain it, but you can as well. The change that adds a new line, the other professional services, can we, I'm familiar with the explanation, and some of this is to be determined, but I'm sure others would like to know.
The administration's proposing updating their personnel policies, HR manuals, and the employee manual, things of the like. We're looking to utilize one of the existing solicitors to perform those responsibilities, which would be outside of the scope of their normal duties that are approved every year. So this is our estimate at this time. We're not exactly sure. We haven't received a proposal, but we feel we can accomplish a number of things with that amount of funding.
And so that would be an anticipated one-time expense?
Depending on the amount and the intervals that we want to update.
Oh, okay, so every 3 to 5 years or something, we might see something like this, but not an ongoing expense?
There might be a minimal amount, but that would continue from year to year, but I think that this is, we're hoping to get hopefully a clean slate and then start moving from there.
Okay, thank you very much. Other questions for the Bureau of Law? Mr. Henderson.
I spoke briefly with Joe earlier, and I was wondering, would it be better to put that in the HR budget because it's specifically for that, or is there a benefit for us to, I mean, either way it's fine. I just didn't know if it would be better for clarification or whatever.
While they are HR policies, they will benefit other departments. For instance, the police department has their operating procedures. Either way, it does not matter to me, but as long as we can keep some amount in there to start this process.
Yeah. Okay.
So I wouldn't be opposed to moving it to a different budget if council so chooses.
I'm not sure that's necessary, but just, whenever we see other professional services as the line item, and it's just like, okay, what is this? And it's good for us to get some, as much explanation as possible. And so, again, I'm not sure that's necessary, but thank you for helping us to understand what that is.
And I think that was one reason I wanted to make sure we got the explanation up front. And, there are benefits to having a line item like this. In other words, here we have what we always ask for, the administration planning for the upcoming year and putting it in the budget, as opposed to going, oh, I have an idea and there's no money available for it. So even though it has to be a rough figure, it makes sense for it to be there. Additional questions for the Bureau Law? Seeing none? Easy night for you?
Thank you.
So far. Then we move on to the Controller's Office on page 35. Mrs. Woodring, how are you this evening?
Fine, thank you. Good evening, members of council, administration, and taxpayers of Williamsport. The proposed budget for the Controller's Office is for personnel services, $108,291. Purchase of services, we have auditing service for $63,000. Office rental, $7,400. Training, $350. Supplies and materials, general office supplies, $600. General office equipment, $600. For the total department expense of $180,241.
Thank you. Questions? Ms. Mealy?
Just the auditing services line.
I think that's my fault. Can I put that on my list of questions to respond to tomorrow? We allocate the cost. We get one bill from our auditors currently, but we allocate that cost amongst the programs that are audited. For instance, the general fund is a lion's share of that.
Right.
Our pensions pick up a small piece, RBT picks up a piece, and community development picks up a piece. So I want to address that, and I don't want to respond. Bill just mentioned that to me, and I think that there's a...
Got it. Put it this way, the cost of the audit didn't go up so dramatically that it's reflecting
don't
a
believe it, but I'll have an
$15,000
answer on
increase
the front.
in just one office. Okay. All right, sounds good. And ditto, the Controller's Office expanded and said the reason that office rental here increased when it decreased everywhere else.
Additional space they moved.
Exactly, so that's what it's correlated to. Just wanted to make sure that wasn't another money not getting moved around, right, so, okay.
And I'll note that we saw the same thing in the city clerk's office for the same reason. Is that everything?
Yes, that's everything.
Mr. Allison?
Just to follow up on the auditing services, how many different places is that in the budget?
6.
Okay. Could we get?
Three pension programs, the 2 major federal programs, and the general fund.
Okay. Could we get a total figure for? Okay, thanks.
I'll put that on my list.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions? Hearing none, thank you very much.
You're welcome, thank you.
Next, we will cover the Tax Collection and Treasurer's Office on page 36. Mr. Grimes, how are you this evening?
I'm doing well, thank you. This is the 2019 general fund budget for the Office of Treasurer and Tax Collector. Total personnel services total $194,824. Under purchase of services, automation services, $20,000. Subscriptions and dues, $200. Travel and training, $2,100. Office rental, $9,700. Legal services, $7,000. General office supplies, $3,000. Equipment, $35,000, for a total department expense of $271,824.
Thank you. Questions? Just one for me. You had an anticipated equipment expense of $35,000 and then didn't spend the vast majority of that. Was that related to the changeover?
It is. We've been talking and discussing for quite some time about bringing some of our taxes in-house. because as Mr. Girardi mentioned, we have found that a city that's this size that has such complex issues, we've been using more money and having less service by outsourcing it and losing revenue. But 2 years ago, the Senate introduced a bill that wouldn't have allowed us to do that. That bill was defeated. Early this year, they introduced it again, but on top of that, we had a potential change in our government and a change in the tax collection office. So we pushed that off another year, but we would hope to have that started in January 1, 2020, which means in 2019, we would have to update equipment, software, and that's also why the legal service line was less than we anticipated, but we wanted to keep it at the same levels.
Sure, that makes sense. And so the budgeted amount drops to the bottom line. It wasn't spent some other way. And,
Correct.
And so in essence, it can be carried over to the next year. And thank you. Additional questions? Mrs. Katz?
What's the bonding premium?
That's billed every 2 years.
Every 2
Am I
years,
correct,
okay.
Joe? For the bond for what I collect in taxes.
And the other thing too, your office rent went down?
I think that we saw that among most places that kept the same size facility.
And one of the things we mentioned the other night was the budget for City Hall operating expenses went down overall. And so unless the size of your space expanded, almost every department's rental went down that's in City Hall.
I missed that.
Yeah, just to help you with the explanation, sure. Any additional questions for Mr. Grimes? Hearing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next is the IT department on page 26. I thought the IT department might be doing selfie video here.
I had the option to run the video or read numbers, and I chose the latter.
So you like the limelight, is that what you're saying?
I don't know about that either. For the Information Technology Office, total personnel services for 2019 proposed, $86,928. Under supplies and materials, $2,000. Communications, $800. Equipment, $40,000. And under purchase of services, office rental, $5,500, for a total department expense of $135,228.
Thank you. Questions? Ms. Mealy?
Well, the IT department certainly has is putting to use many fewer lines in its budget than it has been previously. The equipment cost, it looks as though we spent significantly under what we budgeted this year. Why is it increasing next year?
I'd prefer to defer. There is a 3-year plan where the department is trying to develop $30,000 a year, with some years a little bit over, some under, so that they're trying to maintain a cost. I think that council was looking for that. I think some of it is catching up prior server issues, a backup upgrade, and some other issues. But if there's something that I missed, I'll allow Chris to jump in and.
There's a number of contracts that are expiring next year.
Okay. Understood. And will we be renewing those, or should we expect to see some changes coming forward?
Some will be renewing and some will be
Got it.
some other options.
Well, that's everything I have. Thank you.
Other questions? Mrs. Katz?
So with renewing them, you didn't want to put that in your budget, that there might be some cost factors into that?
It is in that $40,000 figure.
You're putting that in, okay, you're not breaking it down then?
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Mr. Henderson?
Just to mention that it might be helpful just to break that out, at some point for the service contracts or whatever, you have a contract services line, we could do that, maybe it might help break down that large number there for us. But
I can provide you all with the long-term plan.
that'd be great. Thank you.
I think that would be helpful. Thank you. And I'm glad there is one.
Yeah.
So for us to be aware of it would also be helpful. Its existence is the most important part. If there are no additional questions, then we'll move on to finance and personnel, pages 22 through 25.
Under Budget and Fiscal Officer, Personnel Services, proposed for 2019, $100,526. Under Purchase of Service, Contracted Services, $10,000. Subscription and Dues, $150. Training, $1,500. Planning Expense, $125,000. And office rental of $21,500 for a total department expense of $258,676.
Thank you. Questions? One of the ones that jumped out at me here was that in most departments, of course, because of the MMO that we've discussed, the pension cost went up. In this case, it's going down.
I typically throw a balancing number in there. There was a department, and I can't think of it off the top. It was the Marketing and Economic Development budget last year that was removed at the mayor's request. We had to place that number somewhere, so I stuck it in just my account rather than reallocating each departmental expense.
Okay. And I had forgotten that you did that. In fact, you do that with all the pensions based on the number of employees within each department without trying to figure out exactly what the number is based on the salaries of each department. And so, in fact, as you look across many of the departments, you're not seeing the direct expense attributable to the personnel working in that department, plus the retirees of that department. It's just total number of employees divided into the MMO. But apparently divided by 2 football helmets. So where are you going in December or January, guys? Somewhere better than Houston is. So I'll give it to you this time. All right. And then the other question that I had is, I'm assuming we'll see early in the year contracts related to a planning expense, and so there's some suggested changes there.
I think some proposed changes were identified in the financial plan. That was the number that we've recommended to put into the current budget, and Mr. Nichols will be coming up with a plan, I guess it'd be.
And some of those contracts are up, I believe, in the beginning of the year, and so.
Penn Strategies was 2-year, I think. It automatically renews unless we desire otherwise. There's a 30-day out or whatever that clause is. But
okay.
The intention of the administration is to maintain the Penn Strategies contract for next year at the present value.
Okay.
Simply because the levy project is the focus of their efforts.
Okay.
And then the remainder would go towards the East 3rd Street project. We were able to secure other local funds, so we felt comfortable in reducing that line item by $25,000 and replacing with other local stakeholder money.
Okay. In terms of the consultants' support, lobbying support, when you say East 3rd Street? In particular with this line?
Yeah, the $25,000 be allocated. There's a contract with Delta Development for $5,000 a month for coordination of the project, and we split it with a college. So the $25,000 would be able to cover that part of the contractual arrangement. So, and then RBT has another, they have another ongoing contract with Delta, a small amount for the East 3rd Street lobbying effort, not lobbying, but the grant programs.
Sure. We can just call them consultants, even the lobbyists.
Government affairs.
There we go. I don't know, given that my students, some of them go into that esteemed profession, I don't know why people are so reluctant to identify it as what it is.
Not sure.
I'm not sure. So we'll move on. Any additional questions on budget and fiscal officer? Mr. Slaughter.
I thought when we approved the Delta in July that the county was going to cover the cost. The
They are,
donation.
yes, they did, they are part of the stakeholders, they are picking up a part of that.
'Cause I think the conversation we had, that none of it was going to come from our tax dollars.
No, this would, this $5,000 one was not covered by the county.
You may be talking about the Keller?
I
No.
thought it was Delta.
Delta, okay,
The one that we approved in July.
okay.
I think it was
Well, the one you-
100,000
the
coming
one
from
you-
the
yeah, the
county
one-
to cover that.
Yeah, the one you approved in July didn't incorporate this other contract that was ongoing.
Oh, so we have another one with Delta.
Yeah, there was one with the college, they entered into a contractual relationship with Delta, with the agreement that we reimburse them for half. So, and I can get you the information on that.
I missed that one. Oh, before.
Additional questions? Hearing none, let's then move on to page 23, finance and purchasing.
Under finance and purchasing, the 2019 proposed budget, total personnel services, $104,725. Under purchase of services, insurance fleet, $85,000. Insurance commercial policies, $353,000. Subscription and dues, $13,000. Municipal tax office expense, $150,000. General office supplies, $7,000. Printing supplies, $3,000. Office equipment, $15,000. Service contracts and rentals, $6,000. Contract services, $46,125. And interest short-term, $15,000 for a total department expense of $797,850.
Thank you. Questions? Mr. Allison?
The contract services,
That was the additional staff in my office. It's currently contracted versus a direct hire. We're working on a plan, and we'll keep finance informed as it remains a item periodically on the agenda.
thank you.
Mr. Noviello?
Joe, in our commercial policies, we went from 331, and then our actual in 218 was 353. Are we budgeting 353 based on that alone, or are we looking at potential increases down the line here?
We've received initial indications from our insurance consultant that we should be safe at our current limits. As everyone's aware, we just approved the broker agreement at our last meeting right before Thanksgiving, so everyone's rushing right now to put a policy in place and come up with a cost, but she felt that keeping the numbers the same for our commercial policies along with the fleet would be sufficient.
Do you have any idea when we can anticipate seeing those numbers when they come in?
I do not know at this time. Ms. Dayhoff's been participating in that process. I've been providing information as requested. I'll see if I can get you an answer with what I send out on Friday.
Additional questions? Mr. Anderson?
On 24, the interest short-term there, obviously last year, we didn't borrow the $2 million in entirety, so we didn't have to, pay as much, and we're glad of that, and I want to thank you for that. It'd be great if we didn't have to do that again here in this next coming year. But I do remember there were some difficulties with some of our bills being paid, and I had thought that one of the reasons was because we didn't want to borrow that $2 million, although we had authorized it, and then we didn't, and there was just some confusion earlier on, and I didn't know if you could speak to that.
I don't believe that to be the case. I think that there was a consultant or a contractor that this issue was related to, but that was not general fund issues or cash flow issues. That was more contractual and identifying funding sources.
Okay. I wish I could nail down, it happened sometime during the year, but I just remember I remember the thought, well, we don't want to borrow that 2 million. And I guess I would say if we could take it out of the budget, let's take it out of the budget and just plan on not borrowing it. But if we have to borrow it, obviously, then do it so that we can run efficiently here.
We need to have the ability to have those funds if the need arises.
Yeah.
One of the big things that I try to hold off on utilizing those funds for are to make sure we can cover payroll. At the beginning of the year, I ask all departments to push off their major expenditures or their major projects until after tax revenue starts to come in. So I think that more of the departments were following that request in the current year, which helped us out, therefore requiring a smaller drawdown. But based on needs, sometimes that doesn't always work and the request can't be honored. So we may have the need. So it's always good to have the flexibility, and I think that we keep it in the tax anticipation note that we'll notify council. We send a memo to the finance committee when we do draw those funds down and try to let everyone know when we pay off that borrowing.
I appreciate your hard work to hold that back. That's very important to me as as we discussed the last couple of years. Every time this comes up, I have to say something about it. But I just don't want you to feel some horrible pressure that you can't use it when we've authorized it in the budget. It's there. The big battle for me would be to get it off this budget. But if we pass it and it's here, then if you have to use it, use it. That's what it's for. So I just want to thank you for your hard work. And,
thank you.
Yeah.
Again, the consultant was Wood, and there was a question of, there's a number of funding sources that were involved. With the change of personnel, there were some questions. We wanted to make sure that when the payment was made, it was legitimate and it came from the proper source. So, we didn't have an issue of reimbursement or other things.
Yeah, I remember that situation, and I don't think that was the situation I was thinking of. And again, I can't give you specifics because I honestly don't remember. Okay. And I didn't know if you had remembered it all, so that's fine. But just to bring it up again and reiterate, thanks for doing what you do, and don't be afraid to use it in order that, we want to protect our reputation here as a city as well. And so if we have contractors or others that do not feel that their bills are being paid, and we have the excuse that we just don't have the funds, and I'm not sure that was the excuse, evidently perhaps it wasn't, but don't let that be the excuse, because we're authorizing $2 million. And so let's protect our reputation as a city in that way, that we work hard at this budget in order to protect that reputation. So I think I just want to let you know, don't hold back on that because of the comments that I make.
No, understood.
Thank you.
Additional questions? One question I have, kind of like on the last page, but this in this case related to FICA. Here, the budgeted amount was $6,300. The actual estimate is $4,300, but now we're going down to $2,800. I didn't do the math to see how that worked out relative to the federal formula connected to the salaries, but there's a big change relative to the salary.
If you recall, in 2018, there were 2 budgeted positions as salaries. It was identified through the budget review that one salary was budgeted in the general fund, another one was budgeted in RVT's budget. Therefore, we removed that down to the contract services, assuming to split the time. So the FICA was never adjusted in 2018. Okay. It was just the salary was reclassed down to the contract services line.
Thank you for that explanation. That helps. Hearing no other questions, and we can move on to page 25.
Under the Human Resources Department, the 2019 proposed budget for total personnel services is $103,018. Under purchase of services, office supplies, $250, advertising, $3,500, medical exams, $900, training, $1,500, and other professional services, $1,000, for a total department expense of $110,168.
Questions? Mrs. Katz?
What are the medical exams?
The medical exams are our transit-related drug testing, random drug testing. I believe it's under the CDL requirements that we may have those accomplished, so it's the random screenings for the drug and alcohol testing. Sure.
Additional questions? Seeing none, I believe that brings us to the end of your section. Thank you very much. And Mayor, I think we'll take up your budget now. If everyone recalls, there was a typo in the mayor's budget on Monday, and so we thought we'd just revise it and go through it tonight fresh.
Dr. Williamson, Mr. Vice President, members of City Council, it actually feels like deja vu for all of us. Once again, total personnel services, $155,266. And if you notice in regards to the pensions, the increase from $13,500 to $20,860 is because of the increase of MMO. Travel, economic development, 0. Hearings and litigation, $115,200. We do have contract negotiations with the fire department next year, so that's very important. And if you take a look at it, is lower than what it was back in 2018. It is lower because we expect our solicitors, our local solicitors, to do some additional work instead of contacting Pat Harvey. Also, in regards to the large amount, that was because of grievances and litigation, mainly through the police department, and they were able to provide for that additional increase through their budget. We have office rent is $33,400, SPCA $28,000, Lycoming County Historical Society $1,000, Citizens Corps $1,000, Newberry Community Partnership $2,000, Victorian Christmas $1,000, General Office Supplies $3,500, support equipment $1,300, total amount $341,666, and my paper is the same as what is up on the board there. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much, and I'll also note that it is consistent, as we talked about, but now can see with wherever the line is. I think it's page 3, but I'm not going to bother to find it exactly. And so thank you for making sure that that got corrected so that we have numbers that matched up. Questions for the mayor's budget? Mrs. Katz.
You talk about litigation, that you want to keep more of the litigation with our own solicitors.
Yeah.
Is not Pat Harvey more qualified? And I don't mean that disrespectfully.
Yeah, he has expertise in those specific areas, but in speaking to McCormick Law Firm, they feel very confident that there's several issues within negotiations that they're able to assist us with, and I believe we're on the same page. We're definitely going to use Pat Harvey, but I believe that our local solicitors can help us a little bit more so.
Because we've used Pat Harvey quite a bit, and especially this past year. For
Yes.
so many different things, and I guess that's why I was questioning this. You know, and if McCormick Law Firm is stating that they are on the same page, then fine.
And Mrs. Katz, Randy and I have had a couple email conversations with Megan about this a little bit, and I think part of the idea that the mayor and I agree with is to have a more deliberate process where cooperating between the HR department and whichever department where an issue arises, as well as with our solicitors, determining which are the issues that rise to the level of needing the expertise that Pat Harvey brings to the table, and which other ones can be handled locally, which then should be able to save us some funds, and maybe also streamline the process a little bit.
Well, it's also been a problem because Pat Harvey's been called on so many times.
Right.
And people have gotten used to that.
Yes.
And it should be.
And I've made it clear to our department heads, we will contact our local solicitors first, and if they need additional assistance, then Pat Harvey will be called.
Thank you.
And that should help. Clearly, there are going to be issues that he'll need to deal with, and he's dealing with more bigger issues than maybe ever before. But within that framework, that should help to constrain that growth in cost. Additional questions then, Mr. Slay?
Yeah, we're still increasing that by $40,000 though, so we're still anticipating a significant amount of hearings and litigation.
Well, because of the fire contract, and depending upon how that goes, if it goes to arbitration, it's going to cost some dollars.
And then you said also that, so we budgeted $75,000 for this year, we spent $150,000, and you said some of that was absorbed through the police?
It was, I would say, Joe, probably at least 90%.
The overages will be covered through savings in the police department. That was the plan with that through the administration.
So the police,
So, for instance, there are savings in overtime or other items there is what they were intending to use based upon the issues that they were presented with this year.
so the savings from the other line items will go to cover the.
You'll see it reduced in the other budget and it's increased here, so it's not showing any transfers at this time. So when we do a year-end transfer, we can put that in place and then that will reflect those differences.
Accurately.
Yes.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Mr. Anderson?
Just a comment. The necessary evil is that this is the system. You know, we have to go through this process. I mean, we're all bemoaning the fact that our personnel costs are going up. And that's because of union contracts and negotiations. And I think it's important for us to understand that this, while we don't like to see this litigation cost going up, we perhaps could be saving on the personnel costs across the board if we continue to make this wise investment. It's difficult, but this is the world we live in, and this is how this system works. And I just wanted to mention that it could indeed help us in the long term if we invest more in this line item.
I appreciate that because it has paid off in major dividends overall for the taxpayers. And as we continue to, why don't we say, continue to negotiate with the unions because times have changed. And also we have received information from our attorneys that finally, after many, many years, these arbiters are looking in the city's best interests instead of just the employees. So that's something else we need to take into consideration.
Any additional questions for the mayor? Mr. Slaughter?
I just have one more. The increase in $75,000 for this year was due to all the hearings and litigations primarily from the police that we went through?
Yes.
There was one clarifying grievance in the fire department, which was another major one, and we feel both parties did well on that one. But the remainder of them, I believe, were mainly police-related.
I mean, we budgeted $75,000 and spent $150,000. That's significant. But thank you for the clarification.
And am I correct? Does the finance department still get updates on the monthly billing from Pat Harvey's firm? No? No, okay. Yeah, I remember when I was on finance, we used to get that, and I don't know how necessary that is, but I know that we've received updates a few times about that issue, but to see it all in one chunk is, it's a significant expense to the city due to the grievances filed. and a significant number of ones in which the city came out as, I don't know what you call it, the winning party. And so, but we still incur the expense based on how the system is set up.
We had an extensive disciplinary hearing, too.
Right. Yeah, that was another one that we all, that many of you participated in. If there are no other questions, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of the budget review. As everyone knows, next Thursday, our next regularly scheduled city council meeting at 7:30 p.m., back to the normal time, will include approval of both the budget ordinance and the tax ordinance at that time. And then the second reading will occur 1 week later on the 13th. And so that's my first announcement. Other upcoming meetings include Tuesday, December 4th at 1 p.m., the Finance Committee, 2:30 p.m., Public Works, and 3:30 Public Safety. That brings us to the end of our agenda. Any additional comments from members of council? None? Hearing none? Mayor, your administration, anything else you need to say? Treasurer and Controller, anything from your offices? Thank you very much. Any comments from the general public? Neither of you? All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone.